There are more than 1,400 different types of bat, and every single one of them can fly. That's stranger than it seems because birds have evolved to be flightless many, many times, adapting to a more humble, grounded lifestyle, or developing flippers that let them soar through water instead of air. It happens over and over with a remarkable consistency. A bird gets blown off course to some far-flung desert island, and before it's even had time to order a strawberry daiquiri, bam! The wings shrink down to little stubs. Just ask the rail family, which has 30 different flightless members all spread out on different islands. In total, it's thought that flightlessness has evolved in birds on at least 150 separate occasions. And it isn't just the birds either. It's happened for practically every order of insect as well. There are even flightless flies. Perhaps walks would be a better name for these creatures, although the bat flies have not so much given up on flight as outsourced their flapping. These wingless parasites live on bats, drinking their blood and clinging on with their long spider-like limbs. Lovely. But unlike their unwholesome passengers, bats themselves have never, not once in the 80 million years since they first touched the skies, come back down to Earth. There has never been a flightless bat. Not in real life at any rate. It's pretty common for flightless bats to evolve in fiction. The sci-fi show Primeval, for instance, features a four-legged apex predator descended from bats. The future predator looks much more like an ape than anything else, but it hunts with echolocation, and its face still hints at its batty origins, which makes sense since bats use their weird noses to help them focus sound. One of the books that kicked off the whole idea of speculative evolution, After Man, has an entire island archipelago of flightless bats. It's inhabited by creatures like the night stalkers, hunters which walk on what was once their wings and use their legs as arms. Then there's the flua, which uses mimicry to catch its insect prey. There are even penguin equivalents, the surf bats, that have repurposed their wings into flippers and walk like sea lions when on land. Could creatures like this ever develop? If losing flight is so common for birds, what prevents bats from following in their footsteps? We'll get to that in just a minute, but first it's worth thinking about why birds go flightless in the first place. Given how difficult it seems to be to evolve flight, and the many advantages it offers, from safety to new food sources to migration, you'd think staying airborne would be a priority. The large number of flightless birds truly confused early naturalists like Richard Owen. But the thing is, there's a huge energy cost to flying. If you don't need to do it, say because you've migrated to a remote island with few ground-based predators, then it's probably better not to. Especially because that island environment may have limited food resources to fuel a high-energy lifestyle. And if you're not flying anyway, it would be easy to lose the ability to do so. Flying requires a lot of specialized adaptations and trade-offs, from large, powerful wings to lightweight skeletons. And if getting worse at flying doesn't lessen your odds of survival, you can quickly adapt to explore flightless niches, evolving larger body sizes or longer legs. So, onto the bats. And one possibility that might explain their flying fixation is that the Chiroptera are a younger animal group than the birds. Perhaps they simply haven't had time to explore this evolutionary path. However, we know this trait can evolve pretty damn quickly in birds. A good case study is in Aldabra, an atoll in the Seychelles. Like many islands, Aldabra has its own flightless rail, but unlike most islands, this atoll sank beneath the waves 136,000 years ago, and was completely inundated for about 18,000 years, killing off all land-based life forms. Eventually it resurfaced, but even if its ancestors made landfall on the very day the waters receded, that means the Aldabra rail has had less than 120,000 years to lose the ability to fly. Since islands are so often where flightlessness develops, I should mention that bats have absolutely no trouble colonizing island habitats. About half of all bat species live on islands, from the Caribbean to the Pacific, and half of those again are island endemics, meaning they don't exist on the mainland. So bats have had plenty of time to evolve flightlessness, and they're living in the same sorts of places as the birds that go flightless. So why are there no flightless bats? Well, it might be because these mammals skipped leg day. It seems like birds have a head start over bats in becoming flightless because they are already more suited for a terrestrial lifestyle. They can walk and have strong musculature in their lower bodies. In fact, they rely on their legs to get airborne. Small birds will launch with an upwards jump, while larger birds often have a run-up as they take off. In contrast, most bats are pathetic on the ground, reduced to slow, crawling creatures which can't even hold themselves upright. They remind me of sloths taken out of their trees. It's so clearly not where they're supposed to be. Many bats can't launch from a flat surface either. They have to climb something and then drop off to let gravity start the job for them. While bats can use their clawed thumbs to pull themselves along, their back legs aren't suited to traversal. Their fibulas, one of the two main bones in the lower leg, are vestigial and fused to their tibias, and compared to most mammals, their legs are rotated 180 degrees in their sockets. Try and copy this bat embryo's yoga pose, and you'll soon see how messed up their legs are. It's an adaptation that's useful for flying, not for walking. This is another important difference between bats and birds. In birds, the wings and legs are totally separate components, but in bats the legs form part of the wing structure, attached to the same membrane. This may explain why a recent study found that while birds have legs and wings that can adapt independently from one another, bats are like most vertebrates in that their front and hind limbs are evolutionarily tied together, meaning if one side gets larger, so does the other. In other words, bats can't easily develop stronger legs and let their wings atrophy. Not that this would work for how these mammals move on the ground anyway. This might come close to the crux of the issue actually. Bats are quadrupeds, not bipeds. The same muscles that power their flight help them to walk. This means the bats that walk well do so without compromising their ability to fly. The bat hiking club consists of a few species that are much better at walking than the rest. Most skilled of all are the common vampire bat and the peka, or New Zealand lesser short-tailed bat. These creatures have stronger bone structures and muscles than the rest of their order, which allows them to be very agile while crawling. The vampire bat can even perform a strange bounding run, where all four limbs are briefly off the ground. Here's one getting a better workout than I usually manage. These scientists tested both vampire bats and New Zealand short-tailed bats on their specially designed bat treadmill. They discovered that short-tailed bats can walk more quickly than vampire bats, but vampire bats are much faster when they break into a sprint. Unlike other bounding animals like mice or squirrels, which push off their back legs, bats use their forelimbs to produce most of the force when they run. Short-tailed bats don't seem to be able to run like vampire bats, although it's worth pointing out that they also don't seem to understand treadmills. Which, I'm not going to blame them for that. Why would they? But I really enjoyed the part of this study where it explains that vampire bats always got the hang of it within a few minutes, but the short-tailed bats just never did. They would happily let the treadmill carry them along, and if they did move, it would as likely as not be in the wrong direction. Vampire bats and New Zealand short-tailed bats are separated by about 45 million years of evolution, so it's safe to assume that they evolved their landlubber locomotions separately. Vampire bats use it to stealthily approach victims rather than landing directly on top of them, and they can also use their limbs to push off for a rapid vertical launch. When your prey is 11,000 times heavier than you, having the option to hit the eject button and make a quick getaway is crucial. Vampire bats can also become too engorged with blood to fly, so they need to be able to move on land, especially as they evolved in habitats with bat-eating terrestrial predators like snakes and cats. It's not all about escaping though. Vampire bats have been observed chasing after prey like capybara on the ground. New Zealand lesser short-tailed bats spend more time on the ground than any other species, with close to 40% of their foraging time spent scurrying about on the forest floor. They can burrow through leaf litter or soil with their forelimbs and thumb claws while searching for arthropods, which they detect through hearing or scent. Feeding on the ground and in the air has made these animals the most varied eaters in the bat world. They sip nectar, they're actually important pollinators, and munch on both flying and ground-based invertebrates, fruit, and flowers. Of the two species, I think it's much easier to imagine the short-tailed bat losing its flight altogether, because it seems to be taking the better established route, landing on a predatorless island and gradually spending more time on the ground. But fossil evidence suggests Australian bats in the same family as the New Zealand species were already adapted for ground walking before they colonised the nearby island, and they lived in an environment with plenty of carnivorous marsupials, from the recently extinct thylacinids to the carnivorous kangaroos. It's interesting that it could develop despite competition from other mammals, but being on a remote island probably made the lifestyle more successful, as evidenced by the fact that Australia's terrestrial bat is extinct, while the peka is not. Vampire bats probably couldn't do without their flight, as they need their wings to efficiently locate sleeping prey. New Zealand lesser short-tailed bats depend on their flight too. They still find 60% of their food while airborne, catching insects with echolocation in the trademark bat method. But you can imagine that with the right evolutionary pressures, 60% could become 59%, then 58%, and so on, until eventually the animals were spending more time on the ground than in the air. That said, the New Zealand short-tailed bat doesn't really seem to have made any moves towards flightlessness yet. They have relatively small wings, but this might just be because they fly in cluttered forests, where having short, broad wings makes them more manoeuvrable. If evolving to become flightless is even possible for bats, it would probably be a painstakingly slow process. They'd not only have to find ways to overcome the quirks that have made them good flyers and terrible walkers, there'd also have to be some advantage to losing flight capability despite still needing strong front limbs. Right now, even in a bat that only ever walked, the wings would still be much more than just dead weight. Perhaps the Peka Peka had started down that road, perhaps not. But if so, it's now unfortunately out of time. Rats arrived in New Zealand with the first Polynesian settlers in the 13th century, and with them came added pressure to keep on flapping. As a result of human activity, New Zealand's lesser short-tailed bat is under threat, and the larger New Zealand greater short-tailed bat has probably been driven extinct. The last sighting was in the 1960s. With our only halfway viable candidate in trouble, it seems if flightless bats are to evolve, they're going to have to wait until after man after all.